have experience. We have knowledge gained through our research, our study, our observation, and most of all, though, our experience and reflecting on that experience. We can recall, before we awaken to this philosophy of life, seeing the self as present, when we were just more or less purposeless, no real meaning to life other than eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, like any animal out here. But when we heard about and came up to the spiritual platform, seeing the self as spirit, we call it presence. Seeing the self as presence, calling out the holy name, and offering everything, every breath we take, excluding nothing, offering everything to our supreme presence. In doing this, we see that our life has more meaning, more fulfillment in doing that which in our previous life, in this material body, pervading and transcending this body, simple things that had no particular meaning, we didn't even think about it. But we were trying to get fulfillment out of the material body. And we came to the realization, as so many had come to the realization before us, those who had more than enough material resources to get any kind of material pleasure they wanted, but they still ended up unfulfilled because they were trying to live as a material body, neglecting the self within. It's like we were trying to get fulfillment, polishing the cage from the inside and reaching outside to polish the cage, but we weren't feeding the bird inside of the cage. The real self, pervading and transcending the cage of this material body, has to have spiritual food. Sure, we want to take proper nutrition to keep the body healthy, just like we'll put proper gas and oil into the car and have it maintained properly so that it will operate nicely. However, in our ignorance, we were taking care of the cage, and the bird inside the cage was starving. The bird inside the cage being the self, the material body, was covering to a degree our knowledge, our realization of the self as this eternal spirit beyond birth, death, old age, disease. We were relating to the body as being the self, and we could realize no fulfillment. However, since we've come to the spiritual platform, since we've begun realizing that the real self is looking out through this body, the real self is this eternal presence, and since we started doing our spiritual practice, since we have begun, practicing, calling out the name, seeing the self as this presence, this everlasting presence, looking out through this body. calling out the holy name, offering everything, always thinking about self-realization, realizing the self ultimately as divine presence. Since we have begun this practice, we're realizing increasingly inner joy and contentment. Contentment doing the most simple things that once we barely recognized. We're gaining this inner joy, contentment, this fulfillment, just being here, looking out through the material body. No desires, no cravings for anything in pursuit of fulfillment through the material body. We're recognizing this fulfillment, this peace, as our natural condition. It is not something alien. It's simply something that we had neglected relating to the material body as itself and trying to gain fulfillment through the senses of the material body. Gradually we found or realized that there was no real satisfaction, no inner joy, no fulfillment through the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the belly, the touch of the genitals relative to the material body. But since we begun seeing the self as spirit, a presence looking out through this body, since we begun a spiritual practice that is enabling us to realize this presence, we're realizing that inner joy, that fulfillment that we had long neglected, almost forgotten. But as we've come back, a reawakening, as we are reawakening to the self as this presence, we are recognizing something that we really are that we had almost forgotten. But now we're regaining our memory, we're reawakening to the really omnipresence of the self as divine presence. And now we're recognizing, realizing this fulfillment, this inner joy and contentment, which is our natural condition. So we're not going away from it. We're not going somewhere else. We don't have to go anywhere else. We're already here. So engaging in this spiritual practice, we're becoming purified of those spirits of lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. As we're becoming purified, this real fulfillment and peace is being realized as our natural condition.
How do we get to know divine presence?
By our spiritual practice, we are awakening to the realization that divine presence is our ultimate condition. At this lower level, we began experiencing the self as presence. And the more we're looking out as presence, the more gradually we can see an ever higher presence looking out through this body. And occasionally, we can experience the bliss, the ecstatic, tranquil, ecstatic bliss of the self, recognizing that the ultimate divine presence is beyond the beyond all experiences, beyond all dualities, the indivisible, undifferentiated, supreme absolute existence, beyond presence and absence, beyond all description. Gradually we recognize this as our own being. We see it, we experience it as our own being, neglected and almost forgotten in our ignorance, our pursuit of satisfaction, inner joy, fulfillment, and peace through the material body. But gradually, as we recognize the self as presence looking out through this body and engaging in this spiritual practice, we're gradually realizing and coming back to the origin, and we're remaining increasingly where we've always been as presence in the light, in the being of divine presence, our ultimate reality, our supreme being.
Would you say it's a knowingness to have to receive the divine presence? Is it a knowingness that you know that you have it?
Yes, yes, it's a recognition and an experience of the self, a recognition that this is a state of being that we already are, that we've always been. It's not some alien existence or coming back or going somewhere. We're simply coming back to where we've always been. So once we are recognizing divine presence as a self, we realize, we experience the fact that we are returning to where we've always been, albeit now awake, more awake, ever increasingly awake to who we have always been and will always be. This is presence, and our source is divine presence. And we're gradually realizing it, recognizing it as our natural state of being. So this is the point of our life here, is to come back to our original position as presence in the light of our divine presence, our source, our supreme being, which we refer to as divine presence.